Hello, my name is Elliot of TallNerdTV and welcome to this week's episode of Box to Box Score, where we're going to look at the UEFA Premier League and Championship games for the week of game week 34, I believe we're on now. So we're very close to the end of the season. Just a couple of game weeks left in the UEFA season, as it were. And we're going to jump right into it, looking at our first game here involving a couple of teams very close to the top of the UEFA Premier League. Fuzzy Warbles, who is now the new front runner as of the end of the last game week, with just, like I said, 2 games remaining. He's hit the front at pretty much the ideal time. Nostradamus, very slim hopes of finishing in the top 4, and the money places in the Premier League were kept alive in the last game week when he won. And to be honest, Fuzzy is not going to have a gimme game here. Nostradamus could definitely benefit from Son being the main focal point of Tottenham's attacks now that Harry Kane is out most likely for the season. The news came out to say he suffered ligament damage in his ankle. But last time Son was the main man in that Spurs team, he absolutely flourished and really came to the fore and helped Spurs out quite a lot with a lot of goal contributions. So it remains to be seen whether he will do the same in this particular instance. And we move on to our next game between Roto Z Droik and Ben Dinnery. Now we have Ben sitting in 4th at the moment in the Premier League, mathematically still in with a chance at a title, but hope is waning, I would say. He needs to win here and he ought to do it. Even if Liverpool they don't keep a clean sheet against Chelsea, which I would have thought Chelsea would go to Anfield feeling that it definitely can score. But Droik could be in a lot of trouble if he loses this weekend, because he's very much in the clutches of that relegation battle. At the moment, I think just about out of the places, but level on wins. Fortunately for him, the chap below him is facing one of the best teams in the league in Kingston. Now, Jason is a team directly below Droik on this occasion. But I would normally say this would be a comfortable win for Kingston, but you've got Jason with one of the form players in the league with Tielemans, who I mentioned in my previous video. I think actually he's been pretty much inspired since he arrived in the Premier League. And then you've got Lanzini against Manchester United for West Ham. There's the potential for an upset, I guess, there at Old Trafford, just because Manchester United have been pretty poor the last sort of few weeks. I think they've lost 4 out of the last 5 games, if you take all competitions into account at least. So definitely the potential for Jason to really pull himself out of relegation trouble and conduct what would probably be regarded as the great escape in the EFSA terms. Now, our next game is between Nick Haag and Fancy Gaffer. This is very much last chance saloon for Nick Haag. I know I almost keep saying that, but if he doesn't win, then this is pretty much it for him. He needs to win against Fancy Gaffer, who's another team who's kind of been in the relegation clutches lately, if he's to have any chance of staving off relegation. Now, I was surprised when I heard and read that Eriksen's stats have been so positive, considering that the eye hasn't treated his performances so well, and a lot of Spurs fans have agreed with that. But he's had 100% goal contribution in terms of games at the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Only 3 goals scored, but of course he's either scored or assisted each of them. So against Huddersfield, a leaky Huddersfield defence, you would definitely expect that he will have some involvement in that game. And then you've got, on John's side, you've got the potential of, well, will Almiron and will Perez do much damage against Leicester, particularly what could be a trademark leaky Brendan Rodgers defence, who very rarely keep a clean sheet. Brendan Rodgers defences, of course, in the Premier League. We shall see with that one. It'll be a huge game in terms of the relegation battle, like I mentioned. And then we've got our final game in the Premier League between WRI Gavin and TA Mac 10. Now, Gavin's just 1 win off of the top at the moment, but he's suffered an injury to Harry Kane, one of his main headline players, as it were, at pretty much the worst possible time. I know he was off form, but you always want him, or a player like him, to be able to contribute at this sort of crucial time of the season, particularly as Gavin is fighting for the title. And Tate, therefore, I would suggest is poised to perhaps cause an upset with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Shane Duffy, who's a player who's featured in a lot of FPL considerations this week, just because he's on a double game week this week. And you've also got James Ward-Prowse, who's still in the form of his life for Southampton against Wolves. Definitely potential there to do some damage, I would suggest, in those games. So in the table, like I mentioned, it's still the top four all in with a chance of winning it. Ben slightly less so. If he wins twice, there's still the points differential to kind of consider and whether he'll have enough there. But then you look at the relegation picture and it's a bit more clear cut. Like I said, for Nickard, has to win this weekend, really, otherwise he is down. And then you've got the fascinating battle, the three-way battle between the remaining teams. It could get very interesting indeed. Now then, the championship. We have a three-way tie still for the lead in the championship. So the top three are settled now in terms of who's going to be at least involved in the playoffs, because Gary did fall out of contention in the last game week. There will not be a three-way tie after this week, though, I can confidently predict, because two of the top three are playing against each other, of course, in Yamar and Tom Sunderland, which really I think is a game that is absolutely too close to call. A lot of it might hinge on the fitness of Dele Alli, who of course went off for Spurs against Man City in the Champions League in midweek with a broken hand. That has been confirmed, but it's yet to be decided whether he'll be able to play or not. He may be able to play in a cast. We'll see. He may be rested for the Huddersfield game on the basis that they want him back for the second leg of the quarterfinal against Man City. Too many kind of variables to take into account. Like I said, just loads of form players there. You got De La Feu and Salah on one side for Tom Sunderland, who, I mean, Salah, of course, hasn't been in the best form recently, but did score against, I believe it was Southampton, Liverpool's last game. And then De La Feu, who's just been in amazing form recently, particularly of his couple of goals in the FA Cup semi-final last week. And then you got Jamie Vardy on the other side, who's just banging him in lately. Brendan Rodgers has really brought the best out of him since he took over at Leicester. So really, I'm just hands up for this one. I'm not even going to try and predict which way it's going to go. Then you have the third team who's involved in the three-way tie in Jay Forker. He's up against DFS Hambazaza in this game. Now, Jay is potentially poised to take second place with a win here. Kind of depends on what happens elsewhere. But we will I think he will be watching the performances of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, also Lucas Moura, who's played pretty well in his last few appearances for Tottenham, as well as Troy Deeney, who's been the talisman for Watford over the last sort of few weeks. He'll be watching them with some nerves, I would think, just because of them having the potential to cause some damage by themselves. Our next game is between FPL MNOP and CJ Radun, a game with no playoff implications or any league implications to discuss whatsoever. Not an awful lot to talk about, really. Maybe talk about the fact that, of course, Crystal Palace play Man City, and that is a game that CJ Radun will have some interest in with Sterling and Zaha. Will Zaha and co spring a surprise against Man City and blow the title race open again? It's difficult to tell. They won at the Etihad, of course, 3-2 of that Andros Townsend wonder goal featuring in the game. But they don't seem to enjoy playing at Selhurst Park as much as they do away from home. So it's going to be difficult to see Crystal Palace getting a result against Man City, but difficult to break down, and no team really likes to play against them, I would have suggested. And then we move on to the next game, which is the Roto Derby, I believe, the Roto Wire Derby between Sports by Gotti and Roto Wire Andrew as well. Now, Andrew could go level on wins with Mike in this game, so that would help with the bragging rights, but the form of Paul Pogba will have concerned him a little bit. It's no coincidence, perhaps, that Manchester United's form as a whole has kind of dropped off since Pogba himself kind of fell away from the goal contribution side of things. He's not had any goals or assists in his last 4 games in the league. Fortunately, he has had the little diamond that is James Maddison in midfield, kind of picking up the slack for him from that point of view. But we should see plenty of Kevin De Bruyne in terms of Gotti's team in this game, just because De Bruyne didn't play very much at all against Spurs in midweek, only a couple of minutes, so should be fresh and well rested for a critical game in the title race for Man City. And then we move on to the final game of the week in the Championship between Neil Thurman and Gary Owen. Now, as a moment's silence and reflection for Gary on what would have been. Having lost last game, he did fall away from contention in the playoff / promotion hunt, like I mentioned. But he should be able to help to finish the season a little bit strongly with a win in this game. Unless, of course, Hazard does a madness against Liverpool, which I find difficult to think would happen, just because Liverpool typically, especially at home, are pretty tight and don't concede too many goals at all. I would expect Gary to win this game and take a modicum of pride towards the end of the season, at least. So there is the picture at the top that I've been mentioning about, the 3-way tie. It's not going to be like that for very long, of course. Next week will be the next episode of Box to Box Score, the penultimate one. We'll be looking at the situation there, as well as the situation at the top of the Premier League and with the relegation battle as well. I hope you all enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please leave a like, rating and comment by all means, and subscribe if you want to see videos very similar to this one in the near future. Other than that, I've been Elliot. It's been a pleasure. I will see you all next week. Bye bye.